Yes.
But I'll let you get to the Airbnb.
You're talking about,
using too long.
but we'll get back to, but remind me, because we got to talk about pace layers. This is pace layers. And I forgot who created what's his name, who created pace layers. Whoever you are, pace layers guy. Thank you. So pace.
Shadow.
Who is it?
No, I'm just like, there's your shout out.
Shout
So
out.
if you're listening,
Shout
whoever you are,
out. It was a long time ago. So I might be shouting out to
the beyond.
To the beyond. Exactly. But pace layers is this idea of the things that change slowly. And then you have the things that change a little bit faster and then a little bit faster. I think at his bottom pace layer, it's like geology. And then on top of that, it's like country lines or something. I'm totally butchering this, but hopefully you get the idea. And then it's like culture is on top of that. And at the very top, it's fashion. And then I think Carrie Hain may have come up with the content strategy version of this. Or I'm sorry again if I'm miscrediting, but there's also versions of this for content strategy. And this is so true. The main things in the domain don't change that much. Like I was doing a workshop for a company, basically built marketing software for actually like placing ads on Google Ads. And it was B2B complex marketing software. And they had an object called an augmented line item. And I was like, what's an augmented line? What is this? Like, this doesn't exist anywhere else. And they're like, oh, that's our fancy word for it. It's basically a campaign. And I'm like, so why don't you just call it a campaign? This is not where you want to put your marketing effort, is giving cute names to things. Like marketers have literally been using the term campaign since what, like Mad Men, like 1960s, even before that. And it has a very specific meaning. And then you go and you look at, I use ActiveCampaign, or we used to use ActiveCampaign. We are now changing to ConvertKit because we are so fed up with ActiveCampaign. But ActiveCampaign, and I think MailChimp too, I don't know, but like ActiveCampaign, the way that they define campaign is actually not the way it has been historically defined. So they have something called a campaign, which is just an email. And then they have something called an automation, which is actually much more like a campaign, because when you think of a campaign, you're thinking of usually multiple pieces of content or art that is going out. You're not just thinking about the one thing. And so an email, an ActiveCampaign, like an email you send out to your list, they call that a campaign. And I'm like, historically, that's not really a campaign. So the way that we use words, if we can use these words and find these labels that have been in our users' mental model and in the vernacular for decades, and then we can match that. This is all about a user coming into a space, to your point at the top of the hour, coming into a space, whether that environment is digital or physical, you're designing this environment. If we can make it as familiar as possible to them. So if I'm designing, I used to work in ed tech, so I use a lot of ed tech examples, but if I'm designing an app for a teacher, okay, I want them to go into this app and they probably need to see students, classes, lessons, tests, depending on the goals of our app, maybe even parents, maybe even events at the school. But it's going to, what are the things in the teacher's mental model when it comes to this particular problem domain? I want them to open up that app and see those things, and they're immediately recognizable. They're consistent. They're recognizable, like I said, and they're also connected in a way that they're connected in the real world. So I should be able to navigate to the class and see all my students in the class and see all my assignment through that class. And I should be able to navigate to a student and see all the tests that they've taken. And we have so much software. And I would ask your listeners, can you, hand on heart, say that when a user, especially a new user, comes into your system, they immediately understand, here's all the concepts, the really important high-value concepts that are in this system. Here's how they're connected. Here's what I can do to them. And from a permission standpoint, here's what other people can do to them based on their permissions. And here's all the important information about this thing. And I know exactly where to find it. Can you actually say that your users make that clear? Can you, yes. Can your users intuitively figure that out? Because if they can't, your system is not intuitive.
Well, yeah. And a rule of thumb is that if you use the words that they use to do their work, that correlates with intuitiveness and ease of use in the software. So where one argument I had, and I'm lucky I had the tools from your course going into these these debates at work, is like everyone's like, oh, like a purchase order and a shipment are like treated as one-to-one by the customer because, and I'm like, then why are they two separate documents? Why is a shipping manifest and a purchase order two separate things in the real world? And they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, I think it does, because if we want, what you guys keep talking about, automation, the computer is only as smart as the people programming it. And if we're telling them that it's the same thing, how are they going to handle multiple bills of lading for one purchase order? Because you can only fit so much volume on a truck. And so I kept but now I was able to change my tact, and I just grilled them with questions. So like when I disagree with them, they'll be like, oh, it's not different. And then, so I'm like, okay, so do you see in like the next 5 years that we're just going to stop using purchase orders? They're like, no. And I'm like, okay, can there be multiple cargo containers for one same order? Yes. And I'm like, so please help me reconcile this. I must not be seeing what you're seeing. And then they're just like, okay, fine. And then the architecture was saved.
Yeah.
But I'm just imagining like this in most companies, like this happens all the time, where they just make oversimplistic decisions. Like the campaign one's a painful one for me, because I'm like, wait, it's just one email? It's like saying a war is just one battle.
Yeah, I know. That's a great example. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I recently got asked a question from somebody taking the course, and we were on a one-on-one, and she was saying, I feel and I see the value of this so deep in my soul. Basically, she's like, I can see myself becoming a better UX designer and asking better questions, just like you're asking better questions. But I had somebody ask me, and a colleague asked, what is the value of this really for the business? And the first thing I was like, well, what are the main pain points, right? Because it depends. What pain points is the business experiencing? Because OUX isn't going to solve all the pain points, right? But if your pain points are things like rework, or things like not communicating well with your developers, or things like, did I mention rework? This is massively beneficial to the business, because what happens is sometimes these things get into production and they're not quite right. And then we say, oh, we're just going to iterate on it. And I think so much we use iteration as a euphemism for rework. Or we only want to iterate in a really intelligent, smart way.